Views expressed by CamaPlan podcast guests may not reflect those of CamaPlan. CamaPlan does not guarantee the accuracy of information provided by guests, nor does it endorse or recommend any individual or organization. CamaPlan is not an investment advisor, CPA, realtor, or attorney. You are encouraged to conduct your own due diligence before making investment choices. For any tax, legal, accounting, investment, or other questions, please consult a specialist. Welcome back to the road to financial freedom, where experts share stories and secrets to unlocking financial independence. This podcast is brought to you by CamaPlan, a self-directed IRA administrator focused on educating investors on how to grow retirement savings faster through alternative investments. I'm Ricky Trong, CamaPlan team member and podcast host. And in each episode, we're going to take an in-depth look at the many roads taken to financial freedom and how they differ for each of our guests. Today's guest is a family man. He's a serial entrepreneur, business owner, and real estate investor. His real estate career started 20 years ago in Hawaii on the North Shore of Oahu, where he grew up. He moved his family to Northern Virginia roughly 12 years ago to be closer to his wife's family. Omni is a real estate investor, broker, coach, and a published author of the book called The Cash Flow Breakfast Club. I just want to hear more about his story, so let's jump right in it. To introduce our guest today, I have Onmi Casey, and he's here. How are you today, Omni?
I'm good, Ricky. Thank you very much. Great to be on your show. Love to kind of connect with you and your audience today.
Oh, I'm so excited. And you have a lot going on for you, as I just, that mouthful I just said of the introduction here. So I'm going to take it away for you and leave the floor open. And I'd love to hear about your background, how you got interested in investing. Tell me about some future things that are going on for you and your family.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. So I grew up in Hawaii, as you mentioned, and I don't know why. So a very entrepreneurial family. My dad owned his own, construction, waterproofing business. My mom had like at-home businesses. So I kind of got that entrepreneurial bug from them. It wasn't particularly real estate, but somewhere along the lines, I found real estate and that kind of became my passion. And early on, I got to the point where I said, I really need to reach financial freedom. And I don't know if it was, I was just worried about, my family, my future family, or why, but I just got in my head, like, I'm in my 20s, early 20s. I just want to be financially free by 30. And that was my goal. And I had no real reason behind that. And so I worked really, really hard. And I went down this real estate path, a real estate investing path. And it's a very boring path, if you want to be honest, is buying rental properties and don't sell anything and just buy right and be a landlord. And you sell a few projects along the way, you do developments along the way, and that's usually the creative side. But the actual buying and holding and being a landlord, especially if you're hands off, you have someone else managing it for you, it's pretty boring. But I kind of pushed through that and had a goal in mind of, if I achieve this much passive income, that's financial freedom for me, right? And it wasn't my end goal, but it was, man, I would be able to retire, and I was able to do that in my before I hit 30, and I quote unquote retired, and I hated it. And so it turns out I'm not built for retirement. So I don't use the word retirement anymore. Financial freedom is probably the better term for that, because I don't know if I'll ever stop working. I love what I do, and I keep layering on more things and building things. And I think what financial freedom has given me was the ability to choose what I do, choose my passions, right? I'm no longer worried about supporting my family and providing for my family. My rental properties do that. I can mess it up all day, every day for the next day, week, month, year, 2 years, 10 years. And guess what? My portfolio will still take care of my wife and my kids. I try not to mess it up, but that gives me the passion to really focus on some really cool projects. So my 20s the theme of my decades. I live in decades of, well, my 20s was financial freedom. My 30s were about building generational wealth, just kind of shifting the strategy a little bit, diversifying a little bit at that point, still heavily focused on rental properties, heavily focused on cash flow. It got more into multifamily, more into, syndications and things like that, and took on more development projects. And some of the things that I shifted into were higher risk, higher reward. I could take the risk because I wasn't dipping into my financial freedom bucket. It's a separate, investment. And I just hit 40 last year, and that shift and mindset kind of shifted into legacy. Like, what is my legacy? Like, at some point you don't need another rental property. At some point you don't actually need to go buy another investment. You're okay. So I needed meaning behind continuing to grow, because I already tried stopping once and it didn't feel good. So I knew I was going to continue for it. I just needed more meaning behind it. So it really is about leaving a legacy, leaving an impact. And so a lot of what I do now is around coaching, coaching, free training, run a really good meetup. It's called the Cash Flow Breakfast Club. About 100 people come once a month or so in person. And the whole purpose is really what you do, right? Try to help them find a path, not my path, their path, for financial freedom. And most of it steers towards real estate investing. Sometimes it's other paths. But I would say the average person out there that's not kind of attending these groups, they're not really thinking about that. They're just kind of going through life. And at some point, you might realize that the set it and forget it plan that you put out there may not meet your needs, right? If you're not kind of taking control of your future or your financial freedom, it really is almost gambling with your future and not really knowing what's going to happen there. And I really am an advocate of people really trying to hit financial freedom earlier than what society tells you you should. Because I mean, I'm kind of a testament to that. You can go do so many other things that are way more enjoyable. You can still make money, but more enjoyable in life. Once you're financially free, you can focus on some really cool projects. And I'm sure we'll get into some of the projects that I'm working on down the road. But that's in a nutshell. If you sum up the 3 decades of my life, focusing wise, that's where I am now.
Wow, that's really incredible. I really like how you broke up your different decades and kind of like put a label on them just so you can have, that moving forward, like something to really look forward to. Like right now, you're going into your legacy stage of your life, and you want to make sure everything's set for your children, your family, for any purpose. But I love that you also separate and you understand what is your passive income, and what you want to do and what you also want to do, like continuing. So I like how you break up everything. It's very organizational. I love that. I'm not that organized, so I have to figure that out. So maybe you can coach me on that.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. And you have this wonderful Cash Flow Breakfast Club where it's a meetup for all types of investors for them to really find their journey. So what would you say to someone that doesn't know how to get involved in something like this? Like, where do you start? Do you have a process for that, or how you find people to come to these meetups? Anything like that?
That's a great question. I mean, so we live in an amazing day and age where there's just so much great information, right? This is a great podcast. You're pouring into your community. It's free, right? They get this information. They get to hear from experts of multiple industries, and there's great YouTube channels. There's great webinars. There's so many things to kind of find your passion, or at least find your focus of what you want to do, because there's no one right path. Is figuring out the path that you want to take. I think most people get stuck in the details of they need to know their entire next 10 years before they take their first step. I'm like, you just need to take your first step. Your first step will give you your next 3 options, and then take that step and it'll give you your next 3 options. So just show up, start listening to this podcast more, more programs more. And then me personally, I do like the in-person kind of hands-on coaching, right? So I don't know if I would be where I am if I did not find the mentors, coaches, and the groups along the way, because I'm not a very outgoing person. I'm an introvert, by nature. I force myself to be in positions of coaching and training where I'm kind of more extroverted, business wise. But if I had to choose, I wouldn't be speaking to anyone. I'd be kind of in my hole, talking to no one. My wife's the same way. So it'd be us and our kids like shut out from the rest of the world. But I know that's not healthy, right? So putting yourself out there outside of your comfort zone gave me every opportunity that I've had up until now. And it's all right, you're doing this. I didn't even know that was an option. I would love to help you do that and learn along the way. And they become my mentor into this type of investing or this type of focus. And I kept kind of building my team of advisors and mentors. And so really this Cash Flow Breakfast Club meetup really started out, I like to say it was born out of guilt. Most of my investing career, we put our head down, my wife and I, and we didn't tell anyone. We just did our own thing. Like, I'm not in Hawaii anymore, I moved away. So it's easy not to like talk about it. And it was partly one, we're just starting out and we didn't know if we were going to make it, right? We like, so you're not going to go tell the world what you're doing because you might actually fail. So maybe that was part of it. And then we start to see some success and we start to share a little bit with a few people and just felt like we were bragging or felt like we were imposing like what we wanted to do on them. And that didn't feel good as well. Right. And so we just said, you know what, forget it. We're just going to do our thing. And like, I don't know, 15, 17 years later, we look up and none of our friends, none of our family have benefited from the knowledge that we gained along the way. And I start to feel really guilty about that. And as I start to shift into this legacy, I'm like, I can't leave a legacy if the people I care about the most, are not benefiting from what I've done. And so I started to coach and train. I run a real estate brokerage office here in Northern Virginia. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to help my agents at a very bare minimum. There's about 100 agents. Like, can they become financially free, right? Being a real estate agent is a great profession, but it's a job. The moment you stop selling real estate, you don't make any money. And I see real estate agents making a lot of money, retiring, and they don't have a nest egg. They don't have the financial plan. So I said, okay, if I can do one thing, I'm going to help my agents become financially free. And then it turned into like, well, can we invite our friends and family? And then, well, we invite our clients as well? And so it turned into this public event that kind of snowballed from there. And it's the most rewarding thing that I do. It's the thing that is not a business that we don't get paid for, but it's absolutely the most rewarding thing. And I have 3 young kids, 13, 9. My daughter's 9, and she's like the mini CEO. She'd fire me today if she could. And she's all in on running our business, and like we keep them involved in the numbers. And my youngest son is 7, and we try to get them to show up to these events, have either speaking moments or at least educational, like just absorbing high level, financial freedom, type of discussions so that they don't need to wait as long as I did to figure it out. Right. I came from an amazing family, a great family, but we didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about financial freedom. We just talked about you work hard, you do this, here's a path, and you do that long enough. And at some point we assume that you'll be okay. I think there's a different path out there. So a lot of what I do is guilt wise. I went back to Hawaii just last week and we expanded what I do here at Cashflow Breakfast Club. We opened up our first location in Hawaii. And so I'm like, man, that is really cool. 70 people showed up. And so like the epiphany I had is, all right, we have a great training program and a great process. We're going to be opening this up in, I don't know, every state there is probably over the next several years, and just kind of expand this network and make it easier for people to find masterminds or coaches, or mentors, because it doesn't have to be me. It's in our group of 100 people that show up every time. Every single person in there is a mentor to someone else. Everyone's at some level, and you have something to give to just someone just starting. And so that's the community that we're trying to build.
That's great. I love that. I really like that you stepped out of your comfort zone. And I think it's inspirational as well to show other people that they can do the same. Step out of your comfort zone, take a risk, whether it's risk in investing or take a risk for your personal life, and just put yourself out there and really try. I mean, yeah, I think like my risk was putting myself on this podcast to really start learning about all these different options for investing that I didn't even know existed. I mean, of course, real estate is very, well known, but there's so many other things that we've touched on with other guests. And I've learned so much. And my husband and I are both like, oh, well, that's an interesting, thing. Maybe we should look more into that. So, I mean, I think that also goes along with the theme of knowledge, like imparting knowledge on other people, going out of your comfort zone. It really is huge once you take that leap, and you start to see things that you didn't expect to happen, or at least didn't expect to happen so quickly, because some of it just kind of snowballs, and it's incredible what happens. So
Absolutely.
That's amazing. And I love that you're opening other chapters of the Cashflow Breakfast Club. That's really great. Now everything's always in person. Do you ever do anything like via Zoom or anything like that?
Yeah, so we've tried. So I really respect what you do, just because it's tough to kind of connect virtually, and one-on-one's not that bad. But when you are, there's 100 people online, I like to say, I think we have good education, but we build connections is the most important thing of what we did. So when the pandemic first started, we shifted to Zoom, and we did it. We had 100 people show up, but what we started to track was we're really proud of the amount of people that come and actually go buy their first investment or go do their first deal within X amount of days, like a month or 2 months from our, like we give them the enough knowledge, maybe partner them with someone, kind of give them the resources to go do something. And none of that happened online. None of that. Like they got the exact same information as before. They just never had that confidence to kind of take that next step. So that I'm not saying Zoom is completely out for me, or webinars or things like that, because I think there's absolutely a way to build and reach more people that way. I have not perfected the ability to be able to kind of lead in the right way where it's influential enough. So right now, in person only. So I'm going the old school route. I need more in person, venues around the US until we figure out the Zoom option.
There you go. Okay. Well, see, you took a risk there.
Sure.
You tried something new and it didn't work out the way you wanted it to, but you know what, works for you. So you stick to it. That's really not a bad thing to do. So I like that. So what kind of like topics and things like that? Because I know it's about investing for the most part of the Cash Flow Breakfast Club, but what kind of topics do you cover, or like how do you bring people out of their comfort zone? Can you give us a little bit of information, like what you tell people to start, getting them interested?
Absolutely. And so the reason we published the book is called the Cash Flow Breakfast Club for the same reason there. And so it's a parable format. So it's my story, but it's through this fictional character that happened to grow up in Hawaii, that happened to start young, achieve financial freedom. And you got all these transactions along the way, and him finding this club and mentors. And so vicariously, we try to allow people to explore stepping outside and actually joining a group like this, joining a club like this. And what would you learn? All the things that I teach in person, like it's all in the book. Like the next 5 years is in the book, and it's so simple. It's first you got to figure out how to control your living expenses, right? And so the number one expense we have is our living expense, and it's if you're paying rent or you're paying mortgage, that's it. And so we talk about creative ways to reduce that or get rid of it altogether. And in the real estate space, there's things called house hacking, where you're buying a property and your property is giving you income of some sort, whether you're renting out your basement, whether it's a duplex, whether you're the first chapter talks about the main character actually being homeless for a few months, right? So he had no housing expenses. So we're not encouraging anyone to be homeless, but right. So if you have no housing expenses and you're able to hack your mind as if you're still paying that housing expense, that's the key. So let's say you're paying $3,000 to $4,000 a month right now to live, and for wave the magic wand, you no longer pay that. Whether it's you're staying with your parents, you're staying with your kids, you bought a multifamily, you're living in one side, the tenants on the other side are paying your rent. There's other ways to do this as well that are discussed in the book. But let's say right now you have no expenses, but you don't start spending that money. You do nothing but put it into account that you can invest in something that brings cash flow at the end of the year, right? So if you're buying a rental property as an example, the biggest obstacle most people run into is I don't have enough money. Like I don't, I ran out of money, and to think I need to save up another 30, 40, $50,000 a year is a daunting task for anyone, no matter how much you make, because our earning levels are here. And the moment we increase our earning levels, our lifestyle typically increases as well. And, this is kind of teaching people to kind of stay within a mindset of don't increase your lifestyle for a period of time. I'm not an advocate of living like a gypsy your whole life. But if you can do that for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, and you're saving up $30,000, $40,000 every single time, and that's one small property, like those properties stacked on top of each other is a huge step towards your financial freedom. It talks about reducing debt. It talks about, understanding and kind of putting systems around our motivations, because I'm highly motivated about something, but I'm also very lazy. So I'll get motivated today, and tomorrow I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that. Right. And if I don't have a system in place, like of accountability, of someone else calling me and saying, hey, you told me, make sure we do this. Right. If I don't have a system in place, it doesn't happen. And so it's, figuring out and understanding that we all let ourselves down at some point, and that's okay. But if you have the right system in place to make sure that when you want to let yourself down, you're still going to push through, because in the moment you understand the bigger goal. In the moment you understand financial freedom in 5 years or 7 years or 10 years is pretty awesome. And it only happens if you do big things. And it goes into various transactions and various types of real estate deals as well. But I think it's more motivation and mindset, and takes you kind of through this main character's journey and the obstacles he reaches, and the pushback he gets from friends and family along the way. Because that's real life, that's what happens. And so we want to prepare people. It's not all roses as you go down a financial freedom path. It's learning that process. I would say the biggest thing that we get out of this is people come to this event, and it's like they come often. Some people have been here like 20 times now, right? And so they just keep showing up part of this community. And I'm an active investor. I love being an active investor, but that's a job as well, right? So,
Yeah.
and some people after like 10 times are like, I love it. I know everything, but I don't want to be an active investor, right? And so, but it has made it so much easier for me to be a passive investor as well. And so, deciding who do I, especially on the alternative investment side, like who do I trust, or how do I analyze a deal to, for my own sake, know that it's the right deal for me, although I'm not going to run it. Now I know how to analyze that deal because they understand the mindset or the process of the active investing, even if they're not going to go down that path.
Wow. So you had mentioned some of the people come back, to your meetups multiple times. Do you see the growth within them? Like you see where they started and see how they're taking your advice or your steps that you've done and implementing it for their own life? I mean, is that rewarding for you?
It's so rewarding, and we do our best to share the wins with the group as well. So every time there's new people, but there's like a core group that like they just know, they connect, they'll grab coffee. I encourage them to like partner together and do a deal. Like let's say someone has the time, but someone doesn't have the resources or the money, they're going to partner together to kind of make a whole investor, and we help kind of give guidance on that. But really our goal is to help them to figure out how to get to their next deal or their next passive investment as soon as possible. So yes, and so like for example, 2 days from now is our next meetup, and one of my guest presenters is one of my students, from a couple years ago, and she was like over her head in debt and didn't know how to get to that first step, and went from, I think she's like 6 transactions in now over a 2-year period, bought a multifamily property that's cash flowing, was able to buy her first house hack, a duplex where she lived in one side, rented out the other, was living for free for a year. She just transitioned to another house hack, which is a bigger home where she's renting out the basement. And so she's slowly increasing her means, but doing it in a very responsible way where she hasn't had a housing payment for a while.
Wow.
And that's allowing her to save up to go invest and stack on, like she needs like 2, 3, 4 more properties maybe, and she hits her financial freedom number, right? So I'm letting her, or asking her to kind of share. She's midway of the process. So she was where most of those people are right now 2 years ago, and she's a year or 2 away from hitting the end goal. And there's struggles along the way. So I'm like, tell me your struggles. Tell me, what you had to go through. But more importantly, let them know that it's possible. It's possible here where we live. So I'm a big advocate of teaching something, and me not being the ultimate coach and mentor for everyone, but hopefully empowering them to be coaches and mentors amongst themselves.
Wow, that's great. So you had mentioned that you want her to show her like obstacles that she's jumped over. What kind of obstacles would that be, or that you've even come across in your own personal investing? And how have you come over them and be able to take that as a lesson moving forward?
Oh, that's a great question. So I could write a book on the obstacles that we come up
Sure.
in real estate investing. I put a lot of those in the actual book itself, of deals that are just heartbreakers that just fall apart, and you have to get very creative to actually just make it work. On the topic of my co-presenter who's presenting in a couple of days, so her path was, she had a very nice townhome in a beautiful area. We're in Northern Virginia. Let's just call it a $700,000 townhome. Beautiful, beautiful area.
Wow.
But it was like saddling her. The payment on that dream home was just too much for her to do anything. So the hardest decision she had to make was to sell that property and liquidate for a couple of years, and actually reduce her lifestyle for a few years. That gave her the freedom to actually go buy her first rental properties. And so, like, I remember during a transition period, she sold her property, right? And she sold it for a great price. She made money. She got rid of that major mortgage payment, and her goal was to go buy a rental property or a house hack or something along those lines. And she had one under contract. And literally the day she's supposed to move in, it fell through. Something happened with the sellers. There's a lien on the seller's property and just got delayed. And she's like, I think I'm going to be homeless. Like, I think I'm going to be homeless. And, luckily she's part of this group. So people opened up, and I had a property that I was just finished renovating, and I was going to be putting it on market. I'm like, go stay on my property, for a few weeks until we get your next property. And then she was able to hold out for a better property that came along the way. There's no way she would have been able to do that without the community and network that we had. Right. And so, almost being homeless is scary for most people, but she was willing to kind of put that on there, never was homeless, but that got her to the point where she owns 3 properties. She owns like eight, one of them's a multifamily, 2 of them are multifamily. So there's 8 or 9 tenants there that are leading along the way. And yeah, so something along those lines is, I'm not saying everyone potentially could be homeless along the way, but it's something that, when you're dealing with your primary residence, particularly, and you're trying to tie that with the investment, you need to be flexible to make that work.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility of that. And that had to have been a scary moment. But luckily, she had the group to support her, and you were able to, lend her a place to stay for some time. And that's really great. I think that's the best thing about a lot of these meetups is that you do form those bonds and relationships where you can trust the people, especially if you're all real estate investors. You all know the hardships that you can go through. And it's just being there for each other. It's really that camaraderie, I think, that really makes the relationship and the bond very complete. So that's amazing. What about like inflation? How is that affecting, purchasing power and things like that for your students? Has that come up in any of the problematic areas that you're trying to coach them through?
Yeah, inflation's a tough one. I will say I get asked to speak at various events, and this is probably the number one topic that I speak on. Like 5 years ago, the name of my topic was like, what if inflation was 5%, right? And that was this hypothetical title for years. And I'd run the numbers of what does a 5% inflation mean to the economy? What does that mean to your purchasing power? What does that mean to a traditional investment versus a real estate investment? And showing that apples to apples, real estate holds up against inflation better than most investments out there. And then obviously we start to see, and it passed 5%. I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I changed my title to like, what if we were at 6%? And then it went past that. So I ended up revising those numbers and that title probably 12 times over the last 2 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
finally it's like, what if we hit 10%? And we'll probably hit 10%, right? And so we're not quite there, but us understanding the numbers of what money means, and the money is like an idea. If you just think about the value of your money just going up and down with you doing nothing, without no control over it. It really, money is an idea, right? And this idea of something else controlling the value of our money is pretty scary unless you anchor it to something. And there's many things you can anchor it to, but real estate, and particularly real estate with debt, is the best anchored asset out there. You take a $100,000 investment example. Someone wants to invest $100,000 and they put it into traditional investments, your stock markets, Bitcoin, whatever it is. And let's say that goes up 10% over a year, right? So they gain $10,000. And that's they're maybe happy about that, maybe not, depending on what their expectations were. Someone else takes $100,000 at the exact same time and invests in real estate, and magically the real estate market goes up exactly 10%, right? We know that never happens, but let's just say both markets, stock market, real estate market, goes up 10% exactly. And a year later, right, they're looking at, okay, how much did that real estate investor gain? And without seeing the details, you might say, oh, they gained $10,000 as well. Except if they got a mortgage on that, let's say they put 25% down, and that $100,000 meant they bought a $400,000 property. And now that $400,000 property went up by 10%. So now they got a $40,000 gain on a $100,000 investment, right? So it's not apples to apples because of our ability to leverage in real estate. And so not to say real estate's like the only good investment out there, but it's rare that you can borrow money to leverage to increase your investment vehicle. And the only way that makes sense and is responsible is if you're tying it to something that can support itself. So if you're buying something that cash flows as well, and the tenant's rental income actually pays for the mortgage itself, even if the value doesn't go up in the future, your mortgage is still paid, and you're at least locking in, inflation. Because if inflation skyrockets to 10% or 15% and our dollar's worth much less in the future, you're paying off this current loan with future dollars that are worth less. And so you're actually anchoring it now, so your cost doesn't go up. So yeah, we talk about it. We get very nerdy on our numbers and we break down, and most people's heads hurt after they come to one of my sessions. But I really want to like expose them to this. Like, it's math. Everything is math, and if you understand the math behind it, you can control. You can make really good, educated decisions. Decisions actually become very easy after you see the clear black and white, night and day differences between this type of investment and this type of investment. And that's why I'm such a proponent for people looking into alternative investments rather than just set it and forget it and let's just ride the market with everyone else. That doesn't typically work unless you have a very long time to wait.
Yeah, I mean, diversifying is always very important, I think, for your portfolio. Yeah, have real estate, have stocks and bonds, but I mean, gold, it's always going to be there. You can look into that. There's so many different options to diversify and to safeguard yourself for anything that were to happen in the future. So I really like that you advocate for that as well. I mean, that's especially like what we do here at CamaPlan. We want to make sure all of our clients have those opportunities to invest into any kind of market. I mean, I think we even had someone once invest into like a llama farm.
Oh,
So
wow. Love it. Love it.
the actual land of the llamas, not the
Sure.
llamas, but yeah, I mean, it's just interesting all the different things that I didn't even know you could really do until I started working for this company and finding out more about alternative investments and, you know, non-mainstream investments, if you want to call it that. So
Correct.
that's awesome that you do make sure, you know, your students know that opportunity is there for them so they can leverage themselves, you know, in the inflation and economy, you know, whichever way it may go.
Yeah.
So that's great. Where can people find your book? So tell me about that. I want to
Yeah.
know,
So
make sure we can
thanks.
find that.
Yeah, Cashflow Breakfast Club. It's on Amazon. I think we just finished the audio version as well, but we have the print version, e-version, audio version on Amazon. I'm sure you can find it on my website. It's omni.theinvestorguy.com. For like, I'm not a book salesman by any means, and my publisher hates me saying I could care less if I sell books. It really was a manual for me. It was like what I was training. I just wrote down, like, I just said, okay, if I'm going to start teaching this, I just need to detail what did I do, and what worked, what didn't work, what lessons did I learn. And so it was my manual, and then it kind of bullet pointed out into a story. And then my wife was really the one that kind of helped us, you know, wrap it in a story that's a pretty fun story to kind of read through. But it's a story and a manual. And like for the first like 3-4 months, I just gave away books, like hundreds, and I think over 1,000 books. I gave it away, and eventually my publisher's like, no, you got to stop. You got to sell books eventually. But really, it comes down to if someone wants to kind of get a glimpse of what the next 5 years would be like in the Cashflow Breakfast Club meetup or any other like-minded meetup, there's nervousness, right? There's a commitment level of, am I going to show up to this every week or every month or whatever it is, and what am I going to get out of it? Are they going to ask me to buy something at the end? Am I, you know, there's so many tricks in the industry. There's so many people making money on people that are hungry for knowledge, right? And I hate that about our industry, and wanted to do just provide free knowledge, free information, and hopefully, you know, it builds a better community, you know, across the way. And so the book is kind of a cheat code to kind of get a glimpse into what the next 5 years would be.
I like that. And I'm glad that you are willing to give away free information because that just shows that you care about the outcome and you don't want to make money off the people. You really just want them to succeed. So, I mean, yeah, make sure you do get, you know, paid for them. But if you need to give a few out here and there, that's not a bad thing. People always appreciate that. And knowledge is always power. So the more knowledge that everyone has, the more power they have and the more comfort that they can have going into, you know, an investment or whatever they want to do in life. So you have your book. That's one of your projects. What are some of the projects that you're either working on, investing in? Maybe you're just rooting someone on.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mentioned in the beginning, we're expanding the investment club. So I'm hiring a team around that of expanding that probably 100 locations over the next 3 years. And I'm probably most excited about that because I think that's how I'll have the biggest impact. Probably make no money whatsoever over that expansion, but I think it's going to be the legacy, right? In the real estate space, and you mentioned diversifying. And so even within real estate, you can diversify. And I start to do that. You got single family homes, short-term rentals, long-term rentals, mid-term rentals, co-living, recurring. There's so many options out there. There's commercial, flex space, and then investing passively, right, through syndications as either LP or the GP is where we kind of shifted to as well. So this last year, we've been working on a really cool project, and this is, I mentioned, my legacy project. So I wrote on my, I don't laugh, I do a vision board like every 3 years, right? So what is my vision for the next 3 years? Cam Harold has a great book called Vivid Vision, and just kind of allows you to kind of step into a time machine and just step out 3 years from now, and you're just describing what you see in your life, like what went right, what are your aspirations and goals for the next 3 years. And I do this quite often and try to refocus of like, what am I shooting for? So 3 years is something magical about it, because 6 months from now or a year from now, that's very close. That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. And 10 years is like, who really cares about what's happening in 10 years? But 3 years is that magic number there. And 3 years ago, it's almost 4 years ago now, I wrote that I want to build something that you can see from space. And so I didn't know what it meant, but like in terms of like shifting into legacy. And so I just kind of put myself in there was rings and circles of projects and opportunities that could meet that. And so one of those are happening this year, or starting this year, is probably going to break ground next year, is we're actually building, it's probably best described as a mini city. It's a $3 billion development project, the biggest project I've ever worked on. There's going to be multifamily, there's going to be commercial, there's going to be sports and entertainment, a stadium, an arena, a convention center, a medical facility. We're building a city. It's in Loudoun County, Virginia, which is the wealthiest county in the US, but there's no entertainment whatsoever here. We have to travel into Washington, D.C. and travel pretty far for that. So it's ripe for this type of community, but we're actually wrapping this community in a nonprofit foundation ownership. So literally, it's going to be owned by a nonprofit, run by a nonprofit, and the proceeds are going to go to great causes, veteran causes, and disadvantaged communities. So it's legacy. And one, us being able to shift into that nonprofit realm opened up some very unique financing opportunities that I didn't know existed. They only exist to nonprofits. Apparently, there's people out there that want to support nonprofits building communities like this, that, you know, they just want to like be a part of it. They'll provide grant programs, they'll provide, you know, favorable financing. And so that allowed us to kind of even dream bigger. What if we were carbon neutral, right? Normally, from an investment standpoint, it's not a great investment to be carbon neutral because it's so expensive, right? In theory, a community like that is amazing, but it's not great for the investors, right? And so having these grant programs that are allowing us to add these things has been really cool. And then because it's a nonprofit, right? No one could really own a nonprofit. We created a syndication that really, it's separate from the actual development itself. And the only thing the syndication does is help raise funds and help get the funding. There's no ownership. They get paid well. They get a really good return in terms of, 2-3 years, is what the expectation is. The development project is going to be over 4 phases, 10 to 12 years total. But the investors are going to be exited in 2, 3, 4 years or so with a pretty great return. We like making money. We're investors, but this is really, can we contribute to something that's, bigger than us? And hopefully that's the legacy, and one of a few legacies that I'm able to kind of bring to the area.
Wow, that's really amazing. And especially if it's going to be going to so many great causes, you can help so many different diverse people with anything. Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. And it sounds like an area that really needs it. And it's going to bring money into that area and help those causes even more once it is finalized and built. So that's a really great thing that you're working on. And I love that. I think that's, a great thing, especially leaving a legacy. Everyone's going to remember you in that city. Like, hey, this is who helped get this built, and and that they're going to be grateful for that. So that's really great. It fits totally in with your leaving a legacy decade that you're in, and that's amazing that you're moving forward with that. It looks like we're getting to the end of the segment here, but I just want to know, if you were to give out one piece of advice or one quote that's ever really stuck with you, what would you say for future investors or people that are just trying to start getting into investing? What would help them understand what investing is and how they can do it as well?
Yeah, that's a great one. And I've been asked this throughout my career, and it's changed, right? Because I guess whatever mindset I am, I'm speaking to that. And so it's hard to understand who I'm speaking to, because this person might need this person might need this in terms of specific tactical. But I think that the universal approach, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, that I think is relevant no matter who you are, no matter what type of investing or what type of, focus you're in. If you, the three pillars of, if you can find mentors, coaches, and masterminds, and they all do three different things. A mentor does something different than a coach. It's absolutely, the mentor is typically a peer that's slightly ahead of you, and a coach is someone that's maybe completely separate from what you're doing, but can take an objective approach. I coach a lot of people. I still have many coaches myself, right? I need someone to like tell me what my blind spots are. Without that, there's no growth, right? Because we are always capped based on who we are at the moment. And those mentors and coaches help us to continue to evolve, to become better people. And the better we are, the more we can open up to new opportunities. So strive to find really good mentors, really good coaches, and put yourself in a position to be a part of masterminds on a regular basis. And no matter what you're doing, you will exceed at a higher rate and a higher level, in that environment.
Wow, I think you couldn't have said that better. And thank you for differentiating mentor and coach. I don't think I even knew the difference between that. So you've really opened my eyes to that. And I think that's a great way to really end this segment. Before we, get going here, where can everyone find you? What are great places that they can reach out to you if they want to learn more about maybe even coming to your Cash Flow and Breakfast Club? Let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. I dance a lot on TikTok. No, I'm not Facebook and Instagram, I'm Omni the Investor Guy handle, and then my website is omnitheinvestorguy.com. All my contact information on there. Like I said, we're in Northern Virginia. If you're ever in the area, you can come out to one of our events. We have one in Hawaii and several locations that we're opening as we speak. And check back in 3 years, we'll have 100 of those opened up throughout, and hopefully in your neighborhood as well.
I believe that. With the way you're expanding, I definitely believe that. Well, I just want to thank our sponsor, CamaPlan, today. And of course, Omni, the Investor Guy. Thank you so much for being here on this show today. If you want to know more information about Omni, the investing journey, and everything that he's doing for the community and to help others as well, reach out to him at Omni, the Investor Guy on socials, and his website, omnitheinvestorguy.com. So thank you so much. And if you are looking for any information in regards to a self-directed IRA, please go to CamaPlan.com, where you can request a consult with an expert, review our library of webinars and podcasts, or you can also open an account today. So thank you again for listening. And remember to like, follow, and share our podcast, The Road to Financial Freedom, to continue with us on the road to finding success. Thanks again, Omni. I had a great day with you. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.